My next guest is the Vice President for Legal Affairs at the Goldwater Institute. He's got an article at Town Hall, our sister website, titled Second Amendment Shoots Down the Illinois Bureaucracy. Timothy Sandefur, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so this is about the issuance, because I live in New Jersey, and we have firearms ID cards, and I can't speak for it all depends. The process used to depend on what town you live in. Now they've kind of made it an online thing. So that's just the little piece of paper you got to buy from the state that says, I'm clear to go out and buy a gun. It's not concealed carry or anything else for that matter. But this is kind of a similar thing, right? You have to purchase this permit to then go out and buy guns. You can't just go into a gun store and buy them.
That's right. In Illinois, you're required to get a license from the state in order to possess a firearm called an FOID card. And the problem is that then these applications go into a government office, and then the government doesn't take any action on them. And this was this is going on over the past 2 or 3 years during a time when there were riots across the country, particularly in places like Chicago. And our clients were not being allowed to get firearms to protect themselves against violence. So we sued the state, and I'm glad to say that we ended up winning that case.
Okay, so what? Let's talk about the case in a second. What was happening? Was it that the bureaucrat you were supposed to meet with was always not available? Because I've seen that game played before. You got to come back when so-and-so's here. They're on break. Okay, well, when are they coming back? They're on vacation, or they're out to lunch, or wherever they are. They're never there, so you can't get your stuff processed. What was happening? Was it a delay tactic? Was it bureaucrats not being there? What was going on?
Well, of course, if you ask the state bureaucrats what was happening, they would claim that they were underfunded and they just didn't have enough personnel and COVID and all of these excuses for why they were dragging their feet in giving people licenses. But what was funny, was after we filed the lawsuit, surprise, our client's his permit just came right away all of a sudden. So we had to go find another client, filed an amendment to our lawsuit, and sure enough, he got his license right away too. And this kept happening until finally the state gave in and said that they would go ahead and improve the system for granting people their permits.
And in other words, you guys know what you were doing, right? I mean, so what was the process normally? Like I said, I live in New Jersey. It used to be you fill out a bunch of forms. Now you do it online. You answer a bunch of questions. In New Jersey, you have to give 2 character witnesses. I don't know why that's even legal to exercise your rights, but you got to give 2 character witnesses, their names, their addresses, their telephone numbers, their emails, and certify how long you've known that person. You package it all up, and you used to take it to your police department. Now you do it online, and then they get back to you. When they get back to you, and then you go down to your police department and you pick up your little card, then you can go to the gun shop and buy a gun. What was the process in Illinois? It
was very, very similar, filling out an application. And what you've highlighted actually here is really what I think is the key point, the takeaway point of all this, and that is when you're talking about gun permits or any other kind of permit, with building permits or any business permits. When you file your application, the government has plenty of opportunities to delay giving you your permit, delay deciding on whether to grant you a permit or not, and very often the criteria that it imposes on you for whether you get a permit can be extremely vague. You'll remember that last year the U.S. Supreme Court struck down a New York law that said that you could only get a firearm if there was good cause. What does good cause mean? It means whatever the bureaucrats say it means. So whenever the government imposes any kind of a permit or licensing restriction on the exercise of any kind of right, it has the power to extract things from you, delay, and basically suffocate your constitutional rights.
You see, this is what I don't understand. I used to live in West Virginia. When I went to get my concealed carry down there, I went down to the sheriff's department. I filled out a 1-page application. They said, we're going to do a quick background check on you. We'll call you back. I think it was a couple days later, they said, all right, you're cleared to go. Here you go. They found no criminal history in my background, nothing, mental health issues, nothing in my background. I had my permit, out the door I went. You see that in you have concealed carry states where it's as long as there's they don't even ask many questions. If you're not doing anything wrong, you're allowed to carry a gun concealed if you want to, within the reason of restrictions, like maybe not in a courtroom or something like that. But right. You have states like New York that put that arbitrary, you got to have good cause. Well, what does that mean? What is good cause? Is it having a restraining order on an ex-boyfriend? Is it owning a business where you deposit cash? What is good cause? It's completely untransparent and arbitrary. In Illinois, it sounds like what they were doing was just yawning and taking breaks and watching the clock. And oh boy, we could process this, but what will we do to fill up the rest of the day?
That's exactly what was going on. And it took so long that we're talking about a time when there are violent riots going on across the country, and who knows what's going on in any particular individual circumstance. Maybe there's a threatening ex-boyfriend out there, for example, and an ex-girlfriend needs a firearm to protect herself against him or something like that. As the old saying goes, when every second counts, the police are minutes away. Maybe this person needs a firearm immediately to protect herself from violence, and the bureaucrats are, taking a long lunch break when she files her application. That's really wrong.
Now, was this seemingly an order of the governor or, some political pressure?
We don't have any actual evidence of that, but it certainly wouldn't surprise me. Certainly, we've seen things like that in other states in other circumstances. And I think New York, in the wake of that U.S. Supreme Court case that I mentioned, New York has basically thumbed its nose at the Supreme Court and said, we're going to continue restricting people's access to the firearms they have a constitutional and human right to possess to defend themselves from violence.
It's funny. I was talking to some gun rights advocates. They said, we know what they're going to do in states like New York. They're going to add so much burden that you've got to go to Office A to get the application, drop it off as Office B, which is, nowhere near Office A. You're going to have to take 100 hours of range time before you can get your license. And in New York, there's only one range that's licensed to do that, and they're only open from noon to 1 or something like that. They're just going to keep making it more impossible, which is going to find them losing more lawsuits.
And imagine if we applied that kind of rule to any other constitutional right. For example, free speech. If we said, well, if you want to have a protest march, you have to file an application down at the city clerk's office, and they can take however long they want to decide whether to give you the permit or not. And they can do so on the basis of vague standards of whether you're a good citizen or not. And then if you get denied, you can appeal, but it'll take you 6 months to go through the appeal process and so forth and so on. It's baseless to protect some constitutional rights and not others.
What about the cost? Because I know that Phil Murphy, my governor, has basically said we're just going to make the cost an impediment here. We're going to start, making gun shops take records of every box of ammo that you buy, and if we audit them and they don't have every bill of sale, when we come in with the state police, we're going to take their license to sell firearms away. So they're going to have to impose costs, and we're going to raise the cost of permits. I mean, that's another thing states can do. They can arbitrarily increase fees to take that right away from people based on finances.
Yes, they certainly could get away with that. We haven't seen evidence of that in this case that I'm talking about, the Illinois case, but that certainly is another tactic that bureaucrats can use and get away with. The really frustrating one to me is the vagueness standards. And as I said before, that applies to building permits and other kinds of restrictions also. In building permits, very often you find that you're not allowed to construct or renovate a house unless it fits with the character of the neighborhood. What does the character of the neighborhood mean? It means whatever the government says it means. It's the same kind of thing when it's a good cause requirement for getting a firearm.
Yeah. Or you're opening a cafe. Well, the mayor's brother owns the cafe across the street, so your permit's going to take about 7 years before you can open that restaurant. All right. I got to leave it there. That's good stuff. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.